My wife, Jessica, and I have been together for nearly a decade. We have 2 kids, Ryan, 7, and Lily, 4, and our life was something out of a picture-perfect suburban dream. Jessica and I met in college, and we'd always shared the kind of connection that made our friends jealous. So, when she asked if her sister could stay with us, just for a couple of weeks, I didn't hesitate. We had the space, and Emma had just gone through a messy breakup. It felt like the right thing to do. Emma moved in with little fanfare, carrying just a suitcase and a smile that I couldn't quite place. She'd always been the wild child of the family, but her charm was undeniable. The kids adored her. She brought them little gifts, told them stories, and, in a way, became the fun aunt that every kid wishes they had. I'd see Jessica light up around her sister, as if she'd missed the bond they shared growing up. Everything seemed fine at first, but after a few days, I started noticing strange things. Jessica seemed distant, a little on edge. She'd always been organized, the kind of person who could manage our entire lives without missing a beat. But now she was missing appointments, forgetting simple things. I asked her if she was stressed or needed a break, and she just laughed it off, saying, "I'm fine, maybe just a bit tired." Then came the odd behavior from Emma. She was around more than I expected, lingering in rooms I was in, wearing clothes that seemed a little too casual for family company. One night, after I'd tucked Ryan and Lily into bed, I went to the kitchen for a snack and found Emma leaning against the counter, waiting for me. She had on one of those oversized t-shirts, but there was something off about the way she was looking at me. We talked for a while, small talk mostly. But as the conversation dragged on, she kept touching my arm, laughing a little too hard at my jokes, and generally acting, well, flirty. I told myself I was imagining things. After all, Emma was my wife's sister. She'd just gone through a breakup, maybe she just needed support. But then she dropped a line that left me reeling. "So," she said, with a mischievous smirk, "what would you do if I told you Jessica wasn't as perfect as you thought?" I laughed it off, but Emma's words stuck with me. Why would she say that? Was there something she knew that I didn't? Or was she just trying to stir the pot after her breakup? I decided not to think too much about it. But as the days went on, Emma continued her strange behavior. She'd find excuses to be around me when Jessica wasn't. Sometimes she'd look at me with this intense gaze, almost as if she was waiting for something. Then came the night that changed everything. Jessica had planned a girls' night with her friends, something she rarely did, but insisted she needed. Emma offered to stay back and help with the kids, which I found surprisingly considerate. I figured it would be a quiet evening, just me, Emma, and the kids watching a movie. After putting the kids to bed, I grabbed a drink and headed to the living room, only to find Emma sitting there, looking different. She'd changed into a slinky outfit and had a look in her eyes that felt entirely out of place. She patted the seat next to her, inviting me over, and I hesitated, sensing the tension in the air. "You know," she began, her voice low and a bit shaky, "sometimes people aren't who you think they are. Sometimes, there are secrets hiding right under your nose." I froze, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. Was she talking about Jessica? What was Emma trying to tell me? I didn't know what to believe, but something in her voice felt like a warning, or maybe it was just a trap. After Emma's unsettling words, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I'd known her as a fun-loving spirit, but this side of her was something new. She was cryptic, almost as if she was hinting at a puzzle she wanted me to solve. "Emma, what are you trying to say?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, but I could feel my pulse racing. She just shrugged and gave me a sly smile. "Oh, just that you should keep your eyes open. People can surprise you." Then, as quickly as the tension had come, she changed the subject and started asking about the kids. It felt almost like she was testing me, probing to see how much I knew. After that night, Emma's strange comments became a recurring theme. I'd find her around the house, her eyes watching me, sometimes throwing out casual hints that left me guessing. She'd say things like, "It must be tough not knowing everything," or, "You never know what someone's really up to." Each time, she'd say it with a half smile, as if she knew something I didn't. Then there was Jessica. She started coming home later than usual, with excuses that felt flimsy at best. She'd blame work or say she was catching up with friends, but there was something different about her, too. Sometimes, she'd get home and immediately go for a long shower, saying she needed to unwind. When I'd try to talk to her, she seemed distracted, like her mind was somewhere else. One evening, after Jessica had left for another girls' night, Emma cornered me in the kitchen again. She poured herself a glass of wine, then slid it over to me, raising her own glass in a silent toast. "To honesty," she said, her voice laced with irony. I took a sip, feeling more than a little unnerved. "Emma, if you know something, just tell me. All these games, it's getting old." She looked at me, her face serious for once. "I'm just looking out for you. I know you're a good guy, and I hate seeing people getting hurt because they don't know the truth." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. The truth? What was she talking about? Before I could ask more, Ryan came running in, interrupting the tension with his innocent laugh, and the moment passed. Emma just gave me a look, as if to say, "Remember what I said." The following weekend, things took another strange turn. Jessica announced she had to leave for an overnight work trip, a last-minute, emergency meeting she couldn't skip. This was new. Jessica never traveled for work, and her job had always been predictable. As much as I wanted to believe her, a small voice in my head told me something was wrong. Emma offered to help with the kids again. "Don't worry, I'll make sure they're all taken care of. You should take some time to yourself," she said with a smile that felt too generous. I thanked her, but I was distracted, my mind racing. That night, after putting Ryan and Lily to bed, I sat alone in the living room, wondering if I was overthinking everything. Maybe Emma was just being weird because she was going through a breakup. Maybe Jessica really was on a work trip. But the pieces just didn't add up. Around midnight, I decided to check Jessica's location on the phone app we used for emergencies. As her little blue dot loaded on the map, my stomach dropped. She wasn't out of town. She was in the same city, only a few miles away, in a part of town I didn't recognize. I stared at the screen, my mind spinning. Why would she lie about an overnight trip? And why would she tell me she was out of town when she was actually so close by? I considered texting her, maybe calling her, but something told me to wait. The next morning, when Jessica came home, she acted as if nothing was wrong. She gave me a quick peck on the cheek, then went straight to our bedroom to unpack. When she came back, I was ready to ask where she'd really been, but before I could, Emma slid into the room with a wide grin. "I made breakfast. Pancakes for everyone," she chirped, her cheerfulness masking the tension. I spent the day on edge, watching Jessica for any sign, any hint of what she might be hiding. But she acted perfectly normal, or as normal as she could with Emma hovering around. Later that night, Emma pulled me aside again, giving me that same cryptic smile. "You checked, didn't you?" she whispered, her eyes glinting with something that looked almost like satisfaction. "Checked what?" I replied, trying to keep my face neutral. "Oh, come on," she laughed softly. "I know you did. The truth is hard to ignore, isn't it?" I felt a shiver run down my spine. Emma knew, she knew I'd checked Jessica's location. But how could she? Unless she'd been checking, too. Just when I thought things couldn't get any stranger, Emma dropped her final bombshell of the night. Leaning close, she whispered, "Keep an eye on her next Friday. Trust me, you'll thank me later." And with that, she walked away, leaving me with more questions than answers. What was going on? Was Emma trying to protect me, or was she setting me up for something? As I lay in bed that night, Jessica sleeping soundly beside me, I realized I had no choice. I'd have to follow her. The days after Emma's strange comments were full of small but jarring revelations. Jessica seemed to be slipping away from me, in ways I couldn't put my finger on. I'd find myself catching her on her phone, quickly locking the screen when I came into the room, her smile a little too forced. And Emma's words kept echoing in my mind, casting shadows on moments I once brushed off as trivial. One Saturday evening, Jessica mentioned she had a work meeting over the weekend. This was strange. Her job was demanding but didn't typically require weekend hours. Isn't it unusual for them to schedule something so last minute? I asked, trying to sound casual. Yeah, it's just one of those things, she replied, a little too quickly, avoiding my gaze. You know how my boss can be. I wanted to ask more, but just then, Emma entered the room, throwing me a glance that seemed almost conspiratorial. You know, I can help with the kids tonight, she offered with a sly smile. Give you some time to yourself, since Jessica is busy. Jessica shot her sister a look, but Emma just raised her eyebrows, unfazed. What? Emma said, looking between us with a mischievous smile. It's not every day I get to babysit my niece and nephew. Might as well help out. Jessica reluctantly agreed, and that night I found myself alone, my thoughts swirling. I couldn't help but feel like Emma was nudging me toward some invisible truth I couldn't yet see. But instead of clearing things up, it just made everything more confusing. The next morning, Jessica returned home, looking a bit disheveled, and headed straight for the shower without saying much. I couldn't help but feel a pang of doubt. Was I overthinking things, or was something really going on? Emma was in the kitchen when Jessica went to shower, and she turned to me with an appraising look. Sleep well? She asked, her tone light, but her eyes serious. Not really, I replied, hoping she would elaborate on her cryptic hints from before. She sighed, crossing her arms. Look, I'm not trying to cause trouble, but I hate seeing you in the dark like this. You deserve to know if something is going on. I felt a chill run through me. Emma seemed to know more than she was letting on, but she wouldn't spell it out. Instead, she continued with her hints, dropping small clues that made me wonder what she knew. Over the next few weeks, the distance between Jessica and me only grew. She was increasingly distracted, and her excuses for leaving the house piled up. Emma was always nearby, watching with that same half-knowing, half-sympathetic expression that did nothing to ease my mind. She would pull me aside, make comments about knowing the truth or not settling for lies, which only made my suspicions spiral further. One evening, after Jessica had left for another so-called work meeting, I finally snapped. Emma, enough with the hints. Just tell me what's going on. She bit her lip, hesitating for a moment, as if weighing her words carefully. All I'm saying, she said slowly, is that people aren't always what they seem. Sometimes, the truth is painful, but it's better than living in the dark. With that, she left me alone, her words heavy in the air. As the days went by, I started noticing more. Jessica's phone, always angled away from me when she was texting. Her late-night showers after coming home, as though she were washing away a secret. I even caught her exchanging tense whispers with Emma on more than one occasion, their conversations halting abruptly when I walked into the room. My patience was wearing thin, and the tension in the house was becoming unbearable. Then came the night Emma's vague hints transformed into a solid push toward the truth. She took me aside, her expression somber. Tomorrow night, follow her, Emma said. There was no teasing this time, no cryptic smile, just a serious, almost sad look in her eyes. If you really want to know, just follow her. I promise you'll understand. I wanted to ask her more, but she quickly turned away, almost as if she regretted saying anything. That night, I lay in bed, unable to sleep, Emma's words ringing in my head. Tomorrow night. Follow her. When the next evening came, Jessica announced, almost too casually, that she'd be out with friends. I feigned nonchalance, pretending to believe her, but inside I was ready. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it might be. As soon as she left, I grabbed my keys and followed her car from a safe distance. She drove to a part of town we didn't often visit, finally stopping outside a small, dimly lit restaurant. And there, in the parking lot, I watched as she stepped out of the car, and into the arms of another man. My heart pounded as I watched them exchange a long, intimate embrace, their laughter mingling in the chilly night air. It felt like time had slowed, like I was watching a scene from someone else's life, unable to look away. I'd suspected it, deep down. Emma's hints had prepared me, in a way, but nothing could have dulled the sharp pain of actually seeing it. When I got home, Emma was waiting. She didn't say anything, just gave me a sad, understanding look. "I'm sorry you had to see it this way," she finally said, her voice soft. "But sometimes, the truth is better, even when it hurts." The following days were a blur of bitter confrontations and painful admissions. Jessica tried to justify her actions, claiming that she felt lost and disconnected. She begged for another chance, but her words felt empty, hollow. The trust we'd built over years had been shattered in an instant. Emma moved out a few weeks later, saying she couldn't bear to watch the fallout. I think, in her own way, she tried to protect me, to make me see what was happening before it was too late. But in the end, nothing could prepare me for the pain of betrayal. Jessica and I are now separated, trying to figure out if there's any way forward. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust her again. But one thing is clear, I'll never ignore the warning signs again. Emma's subtle hints had saved me from years of living in the dark, even if the truth had come at a high price. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, and Jessica's excuses only seemed more transparent each day. She claimed her work dinners were necessary networking, but each time, I found myself doubting her words more and more. I became obsessed, combing through her messages, watching her closely. I even noticed she'd started dressing differently, more carefully, with new clothes and perfume that she hadn't worn in years. Each change felt like another nail in the coffin of my trust. One night, after another one of Jessica's outings, Emma pulled me aside again. She seemed conflicted, almost as if she regretted getting involved. "You deserve honesty, not secrecy," she told me, her tone solemn. "Sometimes, facing the truth is the only way forward." I took Emma's words to heart and finally decided to confront Jessica. But when I approached her, she avoided eye contact and deflected every question with vague responses. The more she deflected, the more certain I became that there was more to this than just late-night meetings. Desperation led me to follow her one evening, hoping for answers. That night, I discovered her car parked outside a quiet hotel. My worst fears materialized when I saw her meeting a man in the lobby, their laughter carrying through the glass doors as they headed toward the elevator. I felt a deep, piercing betrayal, one that I couldn't ignore. When I returned home, Emma was waiting, her face etched with sympathy. "I tried to warn you," she whispered, placing a hand on my shoulder. "I knew it was coming, but I didn't want you to get hurt like this." The next morning, I confronted Jessica, unable to contain my anger any longer. She tried to deny it at first, but the evidence was undeniable. After hours of tense discussion, she admitted to everything, how she'd felt neglected, how her affair had started as a distraction. She claimed it was a mistake, begging for forgiveness, but her words only felt like hollow excuses. Emma tried to mediate, offering advice and helping with the kids, who had started noticing the tension between us. She was a constant support, though I could tell the situation was wearing her down too. Watching her sister's marriage fall apart couldn't have been easy. Jessica and I began attending counseling, each session feeling like an exercise in emotional tug-of-war. Our therapist, a calm and seasoned woman named Dr. Hale, tried to guide us through the layers of betrayal, hurt, and blame, but each question and answer felt like peeling back a bandage on a still bleeding wound. Jessica claimed the affair was a mistake and that it didn't mean anything. She said she felt lost and disconnected, but each justification only deepened my anger and frustration. Emma was still around during these weeks, often taking the kids out so Jessica and I could go to therapy or talk alone. She had become a stable presence, a reassuring support amid the chaos. However, her eyes held a certain sadness, a guilt that I couldn't quite understand but appreciated nonetheless. In her own way, Emma had tried to shield me, even when it wasn't easy. One evening, after another tense session, Jessica suggested we go for a walk. She said she wanted to clear the air without Dr. Hale's supervision. We ended up at a park, and as we sat under the dim glow of street lamps, Jessica tried once again to explain herself. "I felt invisible," she said quietly, staring at her hands. "You've been so busy with work, with the kids, and you didn't feel seen." I interrupted, bitterly. "And that justifies everything? You think I don't feel the pressure too?" Jessica looked down, silent. We both knew that the excuses she was offering, valid or not, couldn't repair what had been broken. But a part of me still wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was salvageable. Despite our efforts, the cracks only deepened. Jessica's apologies felt increasingly rehearsed, and my resentment grew, fed by each hollow reassurance. The final straw came one evening when I was going through some documents and found a hotel receipt tucked between Jessica's work papers. It was from the same place I'd seen her meet the man months before. My heart sank as I realized the affair might have gone on longer than I'd initially thought. I confronted her, laying the receipt down on the table in front of her. Jessica's face went pale, and for the first time, her calm facade crumbled. She stumbled over her words, admitting that the affair had been ongoing for months and that it had meant more than she let on. She tried to insist that she still loved me, that she was confused, but by this point, her words felt like static. The next day, I told her I wanted a separation. We sat in silence for what felt like hours, the weight of unspoken words suffocating the air between us. Jessica eventually nodded, a silent understanding passing between us that this was the end. The trial separation became a necessary distance, a chance for both of us to reflect on the ruins of what had once been a marriage full of love, trust, and promise. Emma had been a rock through the entire ordeal, but as Jessica and I prepared to separate, she told me she was planning to leave town. She admitted that watching her sister's marriage crumble had affected her deeply, and that she needed a fresh start as much as I did. The kids, who had grown attached to Aunt Emma, were devastated, and her departure hit me harder than I expected. Emma and I shared a tearful goodbye, and as she left, she whispered, "I'm sorry things turned out this way. I wish I could have done more." With Emma gone, the house felt emptier, a place echoing with too many painful memories. I realized then just how much Emma had shielded me from, how her warnings had steered me toward the truth before it was too late. She'd been more than just a sister-in-law, she'd been a friend, an ally, and, in many ways, a mirror reflecting the painful reality I hadn't wanted to see. In the months that followed, Jessica and I finalized our separation, agreeing on a co-parenting plan for the kids. Each time we exchanged the children, there was a hollow politeness between us, a careful avoidance of anything personal. The woman I had once loved, the mother of my children, now felt like a stranger. Life moved on, albeit slowly. I threw myself into work and focused on my kids, who had started to adapt to the new normal. I realized that I had to rebuild my life piece by piece, and for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange sense of relief. The betrayal had shattered me, yes, but it had also freed me from the weight of deception, allowing me to confront the truth, painful as it was. Looking back, I knew Emma had been right. She'd seen what I hadn't, and though her methods were unconventional, they'd forced me to face a truth I might have otherwise ignored. I owed her a debt of gratitude for pushing me toward clarity, even if it had come at such a high cost. As I sat alone one evening, reflecting on everything that had happened, I felt a bittersweet closure. The wounds were still fresh, and the future uncertain, but I was ready to move forward, stronger, wiser, and forever changed.